What's up, Diablo 4 players? So very important thing for Season 5. These are the items that you do not want to miss out on. Basically, the things that you must play if you want to be a really good player or have a really good build to carry your friends or just play in general. I want to open up the video with one of the things that is kind of in like the philosophy of uniques going forward in Season 5 and beyond. This screenshot that you're seeing over in the top right is specifically the goals for the updates with the uniques in Season 5 and beyond. They want players to be able to build their legendaries out, players that can build around a unique. There's going to be a massive update to uniques going in Season 5, and they actually want players to ideally run 2 to 4 uniques in their build. And then they also want to move away from generic fits-all build styles of uniques. That was one of the things that they mentioned in the most recent campfire, and they have actually successfully made it so players will be running 2 to 4, and I got 4 that you definitely want to go ahead and actually run. So to kind of go and start off with the move away from fits-all build style of uniques. Well, there's really only one that I would say that almost 90% of players are playing in most builds, with the exception of maybe an Andariel's build. You want to play the Harlequin Crest. It's just simply too good. It gives you damage reduction as well as giving you that massive amount of cooldown reduction, the ranks, the skills. Like, there's just too much on this thing to give up. Well, they are essentially replacing it with another helm that is basically like best in slot for pretty much every single build, with again the exception of the Andariel's. So what are those 2 to 4 uniques that they want players to play? And there's really 2 that I have in mind that almost every single build will have to play, and then another 2 over here that I think majority of players will want to play. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about some more niche things, because while most builds did play the Harlequin Crest, losing out on that 20% damage reduction for certain builds, that's the difference between like living and dying on a lot of different attacks. So just go ahead and start off the video. Let's go ahead and go over the uniques that you must really play. So for starters, they want us to play more uniques, and they're going to be updating a bunch of other uniques, but I want to cover the ones that like every build can run. So for starters, Crown of Lucian. There is no way that your build doesn't play this. It doesn't matter if you're using core skills or not, this thing is way too good. So for starters, getting max life, core skills, that's all pretty good. But getting lucky hit chance is actually a pretty good stat to have. For a lot of builds that may benefit off of like resource unlucky hit or whatever activates unlucky hit, it's pretty good. The plus maximum resource is actually going to be tagging along with another bonus unique that will actually give you even more damage with that. And it kind of helps out. There are some builds that give you more damage, like on the Necromancer based on resource, or in Sork you can get more crit based on resource as well with one of the other aspects. But on top of that, you also gain 75% resource cost reduction, which is like an okay stat because it's going to go well with the other part of it. So the reason why Crown of Lucian is so good is each time that you spend a primary resource on a skill, you gain 25x damage up to, and then also you're going to get up to 25% increased resource cost for 4 seconds, stacking up to 5 times, meaning that you get 125x damage. There is no way that you can skip out on this unless you're playing some sort of weird support build. For the most part, there's only like a bard build that does that. You pretty much need to fit this in every single build. It is by a long shot one of the top tier items because of the damage. Now, even though it may cost more resource, in some instances that's actually not really a bad thing, but we will also solve resources with another item that I think most players would want. So I want to open up the video with the 2 that almost every single build will be playing going forward from Season 5 and even maybe beyond. So the next item is actually going to be a mythic unique or an uber unique. That is the Ring of the Starless Skies. And the reason why this is so good is it got a more recent buff to give even more stats, even more damage, and resource cost reduction. Plus, as far as like the affixes on it, lucky hit chance, crit strike chance, those are 2 really good stats. Unfortunately, crit strike damage and core damage kind of have fell off in terms of like how good those stats are. Nowadays, you may want like vulnerable damage or some other sort of damage type, damage to crowd control, to really benefit off of your character's build. But the main thing is that you get up to 50x damage on that, and then on top of that you also get that massive amount of resource cost reduction, which really helps keep your Crown of Lucian kind of in check with the amount of resources that you will have to spend because it's going to increase the cost. So these 2 are going to be in every single build. And if you might be thinking, well, I don't play a build that actually uses our resource over here. We'll get into that in a second, but you will be spending resources even if you are playing a basic build with one of the newer items that is coming out. It's a new sword, and now a lot of different classes can play with a sword, so it's actually pretty big as well. But these are the 2 that I'd say in every single build you will see this time and time again. But the next 2 over here, these are where it kind of fits into to their other two, because ideally they want people to play 2 to 4, and these are definitely going to be the two right here that almost every single build. There's like one exception, Andariel's, that's it. But for the most part, I don't see anything else other than maybe if you're playing a Druid build and you need Vasili's Prayer or Tempest Roar to actually run your build, I get it. But for the most part, most builds will have to swap off. You're going to definitely want to run Crown of Lucian. It's legit like crazy. 125x. That's like some player's entire Paragon board plus. Like the numbers that you get with this are just crazy. It's definitely in the level of a Uber or Mythic unique. This thing is definitely going to be played. And then the next two items, again, it's going to be a little bit more, I would say, conditional, but for the most part, most people will be playing these two. So the first one is an amulet that's Lochran's Talisman. So what's so good about this item? Well, it's got attack speed. All stats is actually pretty good since they lowered the bar on a lot of the Paragon nodes. You can actually hit a lot more things. You get a crazy amount of crit strike damage on the item. I know this one is showing Masterwork, but even if we don't go to the Masterwork one or even just a greater affix and we just look at the item, I mean, it's still pretty good. 166, that's basically a top tier roll on a two-hander for, let's say, crit strike damage. That's a really good amount of numbers. Then it also gives you maximum resource, and I was talking about how that actually helps out with the Crown of Lucian to get more resource. But on top of that, you also gain up to 50% crit strike chance, which is crazy. That's half of your crit just done with your character. You have a base of 5. You can get one of the stats on the characters, depending on the class that you play, will give you extra crit. And on top of that, you can also get, you also have crit on your Ring of Starless Skies, maybe in your gloves, your other ring. And at that point, you can easily reach like 60 to 70% crit without really trying. Obviously, that would be considering a higher end of the roll, but again, this is not a uber unique. You'll eventually get one if you just played the game. But on top of that, each point of primary resource above 100 grants 1% critical strike damage instead. This is actually treated as an X value, not a plus value, so it is actually way better, meaning that you're gonna get way more damage with this, and pretty much most Diablo builds can actually scale to get some sort of bonus with, let's say, crit strike damage or even getting crit strike chance with like Gushing Wounds, which we're playing right now with the really popular Barbarian Whirlwind build. So that's going to be really good, and it's just because you get so much damage with this item and it kind of solves crit, as there's a lot of builds that like get some sort of bonus off of when you crit. This happens, right? Like if you're playing Druid, well, you want Envenom to proc, so you need to go ahead and crit with Werewolf or whatever the case may be. It really helps out gain some sort of a bonus, and it's going to be in a lot of builds. The next one over here is going to be the boots, the Racnoth's Wake. So looking at this item, the reason why it's so strong is you're getting a lot of stats that boots normally can't roll. So one that it can roll is movement speed. That's fine. But the other 3 stats are actually quite important. So you get cooldown reduction, which you normally cannot actually roll on boots, and cooldown reduction is a really good thing in Diablo. It's one of the best stats that you can get in D3 as well. And then you also have resistance to all elements. Now, even if we don't take a like perfect, like, one over here, if we were to get this item, and let's say it's not greater affix, it's just basically on its base, there's nothing that's going to give you 50 to all res. That is crazy good. And the reason why it's so good to have it on the boots over here to get that crazy amount, and if you masterwork or get a greater affix, well, you're going to be able to get an insane amount of resistances, which really helps solve rolling, like, let's say, 1 resistance in your chest piece. Maybe you need to get a tempered resistance. Maybe you need to go ahead and throw in different gems in your jewelry. Now, you may not even need to roll armor because you can throw in socketed skulls in your jewelry pieces, and that's actually going to free up a lot of the brand new tempers to give you way more damage, cooldown reduction, or any other sort of thing. This actually solves a problem of several different resistances, which for certain classes like the Barbarian or Rogue are actually quite big. Classes like the Sorceress may not need this as much, but there's a specific thing that actually works really well with the Sorceress, and that is non-physical damage, making you reach things like Frigid Fate's extra bonus because you need the specific to cold damage, which non-physical counts as cold, shadow counts all of those damage types, so it can really benefit off of getting stuff that maybe your character normally wouldn't be able to hit. And let's say you're playing a build like Andariel's or any other build that would require your character to scale something that you normally can't. I mean, getting 200 to that, if you do go all the way, could be pretty good, but even on the lower stats, it's still pretty good. You could even run this in like, let's say, Gore's Devastating Grips or some sort of niche build. This actually has a lot of applications to it. On top of that, we didn't even go over the unique effect. When you cast a skill, you get to do some sort of fire damage. Now, this could be actually kind of good for certain builds that need to do some sort of like, every time you hit an enemy, like the damage can ramp up, right? There's a lot of those sort of things, and this can actually help out reach those targets a little bit faster, while the damage is still like actually okay. It's respectable. I don't really see at the moment a build that just instantly runs this. There is something that you can do that's pretty crazy with the Necromancer, which actually tags if you are unable to activate the skills requirement, like if you were to, let's say, do something that requires a corpse and there's no corpse, that actually tags it. So there could be some crazy interaction where you can make that your main source of damage. But that stat is still not bad, but it's mainly the other ones that I mentioned, which is cooldown reduction and resistances. And then again, you're getting like offensive stats on boots, which normally doesn't really roll, which is a good thing if you do need those like X multipliers to meet in terms of like other odd damage. So I think this has a lot of applications. So now that we went over like the main 4 that they kind of want you to mainly play, and then the other 2 like right here, those are definitely it. I want to go over another really important thing because you're going to be dropping Harlequin on a lot of builds, and I've noticed a lot of people on the PTR saying that they feel way more squishy. And the reason why you're probably going to feel more squishy is simply due to the amount of other changes that your build has had, maybe in the Paragon board, or changing certain things in your tree to get like more damage or more utility. You may be sacrificing some defenses. So these are going to be kind of the key items to actually surviving Season 5 and beyond. So for starters, there's actually a brand new pair of gloves over here that are actually really great. Now, unfortunately, the offensive stats aren't really here. You're missing out on attack speed and crit strike chance, but Endurant Faith can actually help you survive. Like if you're doing a very specific piece of content, maybe you want to try to tackle Uber Lilith and just feel like you're just instantly dying, and this can really help out survive some of those one-shot mechanics. And basically, it's a pretty decent thing where if you would basically take more than 40% of your maximum life, instead it's distributed over the next 4 seconds, and you get that massive amount of damage reduction, which in the glove category you normally don't have. Plus it does have lucky hit. As far as healing received goes, it's surprisingly actually a pretty good stat, maybe for later down the line in the game, but as far as right now goes, it just really helps surviving the one-shots. Another thing that I wanted to mention that will be in a lot of builds is the Shard of Varethel. So remember how I was saying it doesn't matter even if you are using a ability that would normally require you to spend resource for the other item, the Crown of Lucian. Well, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to want Ring of Starless Skies as well as this, and you're going to be able to spend resources even if you're playing a Heartseeker, Rogue, or maybe a Bash Barbarian. A lot of the basic skill builds, even the Arclash Sorceress build that is getting some buffs in Season 5. The Shard of Varethel gives you a really good amount of stats. I mean, it's giving you all stats, basic, attack speed, and as well as getting maximum resource and basic skills deal a massive amount of damage, but now they cost primary resource. So that's really what you're here for on this. It's just really good for all the basic builds. This one's a little bit more niche, but it will definitely help you out. This one's not really for survival, but it's another one that I wanted to go ahead and mention, as these are definitely like the 4 that every build pretty much will be looking forward to for the most part. And then this one over here will really help out with any basic builds, but this is mainly for survivability, and the next one that I want to talk about is really good. Tyrell's Might with maximum resistance to all elements is actually a crazy strong stat. So to kind of explain this, and just without getting into numbers right here, you can only go to 70 resistances, right? However, you can technically go up to 85 with Tyrell's plus, let's say, Tacits of the Dawning Sky, or in your Paragon, or your skill tree. There are some different builds that can give you plus maximum resistances, right? Or maybe an aspect that can actually boost up your resistance. That stat is actually so big. Getting that extra 15% that you normally can't just like get, it's called maximum resistance to all elements or whatever type. That's actually pretty much 50% damage reduction if you can reach that extra 15%. That's kind of the way it works without getting too far into it. If you played Path of Exile, it's the same thing. It's absolutely crazy to go above that 70% in terms of resistances. Plus you get damage reduction, which is great, and the whole like barrage thing, it's mediocre, I'll be honest, unless you're playing like a very specific build that can scale it. But getting that flat damage reduction, that's a new premium stat. But this plus the boots, I mean, you're pretty much good to go on resistances. Again, solving a lot of issues with not only resistances, but freeing up other things like tempering armor or getting armor rolls. Now you can go for max life, you can go for other things, maybe you want more offensive stats, and it really frees up the areas to do that. Another really good item that now all classes can play pretty much is going to be the DoomBringer. So there may be a build that you don't really need to have like your weapon slot. A lot of sorceresses are actually running this. Heck, Rogue can run this as well. Well, you could always run on that, but sorceresses can now run this. A lot of other classes can kind of run things that you normally aren't really going to be using, and that's going to be great in Season 5 and beyond. But specifically DoomBringer giving you that massive amount of damage reduction and maximum life, those two stats are so good in a offensive area where, again, you may need to beef up your defenses because a lot of builds, let's be honest, we all kind of relied on the Harlequin Crest to give us that 20%. And if you're sacrificing this item for Lucian, which gives you crazy damage, you may need to make up for it, and this will really help you out. But keep in mind, PTR is scaled a little bit differently. Things aren't always accurate, especially in the pit boss area. Well, things are not really up to par with like the live server. So if you are dying too frequently, this is a massive boost. If you're playing a Thorn Barbarian, the more HP you get, the more damage you deal, and this is really great for survivability. I just want to go over some other survivability things, as a lot of these are going to be offensive. I mean, there's really not too many defensive stats, and a lot of things we mentioned over here, other than I guess this one has resistances. But don't miss out on those items, but these are basically items that you must play in Season 5 for sure. Like, these 4 are going to be used in, again, most content creators' builds, so expect to go ahead and have these ready. But nonetheless, there's going to be even more updates to uniques in Season 5, and if you guys want to be up to date so you don't miss out, that way you know if that item drops, it's not garbage anymore, because a lot of uniques, after they added tempering, kind of became garbage to the game. But again, Season 5 will be shifting things up as they want to actually make uniques great, and I think that's a great idea. Anyways, that's going to wrap things up. Drop a like on your way out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.